My name is Laura Williams, and I'm with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And you can go next slide, Cory. And this is a very quick talk about the RCPP program. And I've been with the Natural Resource Conservation Service and this program since 2016. I come to this program from another former life where I was a wildlife biologist, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then some state conservation agencies. And then I joined this program because I believe in landscape sort of conservation at landscape level, which brings me to the purpose of RCPP, is to address conservation goals on regional scale and to combine NRCS funding and partner contributions in a way that they maximize each other, so there's greater impact together, and to result in measurable improvements and outcomes tied to the resource concerns identified for that project. Okay, so how does it work? Well, RCPP helps producers protect working agricultural lands to address landscape level conservation issues. And how this happens is NRCS and partners work together. They co-invest to address these resource concerns. And it is always through a partner initiated proposal where, and this happens on private lands, private agricultural lands, non-industrial forest lands, tribal lands. And RCPP projects are generally 5 years. There can be a 1-year extension, so sometimes they can be 6 years. Next slide. Okay, so we have 2 distinct programs, which I'll mention now and talk a little bit more. We have what's called RCPP Classic and the Alternative Funding Arrangement. These programs are funded through 2 nationwide funding pools. Right now, we have a notice of funding announcement that's out. It went out on May 19th. I'll kind of cover that timeline towards the end. But so we're in a funding cycle where we're looking for proposals. So the 2 fundings are the state and home-based state, and this is if you're going to do your project, conduct your project in 1 state or across 2 states, or it's even 3 states. Right now, we have some that are across 2 states. And with those projects, they can have any resource concern, and that becomes that is in contrast to the critical conservation area funding pool, which is next slide, specific areas across the United States. Oops, did we miss a slide? No, okay. There's 8 specific areas across the United States that are called critical conservation areas, and they're real special ecoregions. If you're applying for this funding pool, you must address at least one of the specific resource concerns in that specific critical conservation area. Now, the next slide, in Washington State, it is the Western Waters, and you can see it in green there. It spans 3 different states, critical conservation area, and it has 3 separate resource concerns, and you must address one of those resource concerns in your proposal to apply for this funding pool. So it's water quality degradation, excess or insufficient water and drought, and then inadequate habitat for fishing and wildlife. One of the things that I want to make sure that people know is that when you do choose a resource concern and a proposal, and we'll talk about this a little bit toward the end of the talk, it's really great to go in and talk with your local field office if you're not really certain about which ones to choose, because you want to match up. NRCS funding will be for NRCS practices, and you want to match those up with the resource concerns. A mismatch can cause a lot of problems. So, highlights of our notice of funding opportunity right now is there's $500 million total for Classic and the alternative funding arrangements. So 225 is from the IRA funding, which I know you've heard a lot about with NRCS, and then 275 million is from the regular Farm Bill funding. So 50 million actually in this funding announcement set aside for alternative funding arrangements specifically with tribes. And for anybody who might be working with tribes, because partnerships can be, a partner can be also a partner with tribes, there's going to be a special June 21st webinar. And see me at the end if you want to get on a list. I meant to send one around and I didn't. For more information on that, I don't have the links to that, but we can get that around or email me. Okay. So Project amounts can be between 250,000 and 25 million, so they've increased quite a bit. In our state here, we found that some very successful projects are even at the lower end. They're really successful, they're small, they're specific, and they achieve their goal and they achieve measurable objectives. So don't think that you have to have a large project to get funded or, you know, for it to be successful, because that is not at all the case. So I just want to encourage people to not necessarily go big. So financial assistance, and we'll talk a little bit about what financial assistance is for, 70%, and technical assistance is 25%. Financial assistance, go ahead and go forward. So, okay, so the programs, let's talk about that now. I'm going to go back to classic, and then we'll talk a little bit about what FA and TA are, financial assistance and technical assistance. So in RCPP Classic, NRCS reimburses producers directly with financial assistance through producer contracts. And this is very similar to EQIP and CSP, producer contracts for practices that they put on the ground on their property. And that contracting development and management is generally handled by NRCS. So NRCS often delivers most of the technical assistance in Classic, or a large part of it. But partners may also be awarded technical assistance for conservation planning for the skills and training and capacity that they have. So oftentimes that's split, and it can be very project dependent. Okay, partners' primary roles are with the project management, managing all the partners, managing whatever other funding they have coming in, outreach, producer customer service, measuring the impacts of the project, that's the outcomes that we'll talk about in a minute, and delivering partner contributions in a coordinated fashion with the NRCS funding. So partner deliver contributions to amplify NRCS funding. Okay. So alternative funding arrangements. Partner installs practices for the producers or reimburses producers for FA activities. Alternative funding arrangement is more partner driven. It is more grant like. Partners will install practices, either NRCS or others, and will reimburse the producers, and NRCS will reimburse the partners. So the trick to this, though, this independence, is that partners must have JAA certified practices, and this is an issue in this state, I know. Or if they're going to do something other than NRCS practices, not already covered by NRCS NEPA, then they need to have that NEPA done. So they need to have a plan for how to execute that, and then the project within the 5-year period. So those are kind of just caveats to the alternative funding arrangement, which is really attractive. And it is working well in some states where there's more JAA. So if that's something you're interested in, that's something that I think we need to talk more about. And in this state, you need to work with your local DC and then move up through your local area conservationist. I see, Zora, that you have your hand up. Is it at all possible to save it toward the end, or you tell people what JAA and oh, job, thank you. Yeah, job approval authority. So job approval authority. Job approval authority is when you have the training and the certification to be able to certify an NRCS practice. And so that it means for these purposes, you've worked with NRCS and gone through not only some classroom training, but then field training and review in order for NRCS and that partner and that individual to agree that you can certify the NRCS practices that are in producer contracts. Okay, so in this model, in this kind of program, partner delivers all project TA in support of producer contracts and easements. So, and then NRCS reduces the partner for it. So NRCS is very limited. We still have to do things that are inherently governmental, such as any NEPA compliance that has to be done. And those of you who work in the field and have worked with NRCS, that's a form, because we do have NEPA is completed for NRCS practices. That's a record of decision on the EIS. It's now nationwide. We do a form that's called the PPA 52, which is kind of a checklist that follows on from that. If that's not occurring, NRCS wouldn't do that, and it would be the partner's NEPA activity that had already occurred and we had in the project. Other things NRCS is responsible for is ultimately completing endangered species consultations, if there's any endangered species in the project area, or the National Historic Preservation Act compliance. And partners can help a lot with that, and many of our partners do help with that, but ultimately NRCS will kind of have activities to do and sign off. But those would be the only areas in the alternative funding arrangement where NRCS would kind of jump in, otherwise it would be all partners. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about eligible activities, partners, and land. And activity types for RCPP under the 2018 Farm Bill. RCPP moved to its own program. It used to be a program that fell underneath our EQIP and CSP programs, and a few others are EQIP programs. But when it became a standalone program, we got our own lingo and language, and it runs similar to the other programs. So go back just a bit. Land management is really this is contracting to producers similar to EQIP and CSP, which is called land management instead of EQIP and CSP. And then we've got rentals, which is kind of a new innovation that we've are interested in using here in the state, and we have not successfully used it yet, but it is kind of like a conservation reserve program where you're going to rent out a part of a producer's land that they are forgoing any activities, you know, whether it be forestry or ag things, because they're moving to something else, or we're trying to preserve something else. So there's a whole broad set of reasons that you might do that. The rental has to have two things. It has to fit with the project purpose and be addressing the resource concerns of the project. And then it has to also ensure that there's no other NRCS funding for foregone income on that land at that time. So kind of leaves it open for a lot of activities. And then the other thing is that this is not long-term. CRP is more long-term. It's for the life of the project. So it really is a short stopgap, I guess. And then we have US held easements and entity held easements. They run very similar to the ASAP and the WRA and the HRT program that we have in other programs. The one unique thing is that they can be for the project purpose. So in ASAP, it's for ag lands, or in special cases, grasslands. For here, if your project purpose is forest resilience or something like that, or wildlife, you could have easements for wildlife or forest resilience. And it could be entity or US held easements. And then we have a watershed project, which is difficult to utilize. So watershed projects and PL 566 projects usually require watershed plans, and they do under RCPP, which is really hard to fit that into a 5-year timeline, because that's also a whole NEPA process and a watershed planning process. So what we have asked is that usually partners do a lot of talking with us ahead of time, and we decided that important to start down that project first and have your RCPP project tier off of that. So that takes a lot of discussions. There is a very limited scenario where watershed projects can be on, and watershed projects are oftentimes on public lands, where watershed projects can be land management contracts on public lands, but they have to benefit producers in that area that are part of that project, contracted as part of that project. So it's a little bit tricky. It's not utilized a lot because it is tricky across the US. Okay. So I'm just going to run through entity held easements real quick. We're not going to do a deep dive. Entity held in US easements in general is a whole separate presentation, and we will be having one soon online by who I'll introduce here at the end, our easement liaison, and that will go more deeply into easements. That will be available. So entity held easements are held by an eligible partner. They're permanent. They're developed with producers through parcel contracts. And we have, because RCPP does allow for easements to be of any project purpose, whatever the project purpose is, there's 6 different deed terms that could be possible that all have different restriction levels. Okay, next one. And in US held easements are held by the US. Sometimes, but not always, they require a component of restoration. And again, the purpose is driven by the goals of the project. And there's 3 standard warranty deeds. So beyond that, I'm gonna save the rest. Anybody interested, check with me and we'll make sure you have information on the easement. Okay, so eligible lead partners for all RCPP projects are state units of government, state and local units of government, tribes, ag organizations, conservation districts, water districts, municipal districts, higher education, and any organization really that can show some kind of agricultural activity or association. So it's very broad. Contributing partners can be any of the contributing partners and third-party individuals or organizations. Producer contracts, however, are not, producers being contracted are not considered contributing partners. And then lead partners, contributing partners usually contribute some kind of in-kind or monetary contribution, or significant contribution is what we say. And so the lead partner is generally responsible to make sure that those contributing partners do contribute what they have pledged in the proposal process to contribute. Okay, so the eligible land is the same for all NRCS projects, EPRIT, CSP, all of that. You go through potential producers who are out there as customers. They go through all the same NRCS eligibility requirements. We work through FSA and that whole process of it's agricultural, non-industrial, private forest land, associated lands, tribal lands. And I talk a little bit about limited public lands if they are associated with the producer contracts on eligible lands that the project is addressing. And then eligible producers, as I said, are the same as those for all other NRCS projects and programs. Okay, so one of the RCPP flexibilities is that AGI has the adjusted gross income has can be waived. It can be waived on a project level, and it can be waived on an individual producer level. So if there is a project, and we do have one right now, where there are several producers, in order for the project to be successful, they put it in their funding proposal. We're going to need to waive AGI for the whole project, and in order for it to be successful. And so we did that in the proposal and we funded it. And so we haven't actually got to that stage of producer contracting. So we'll see how that goes. But theoretically, AGI should be waived for each and every one of those producers, and we will not go through that step when we do producer contracting. If you get to into a project and you find that there is one producer that is critical to the project and their AGI is above what is allowed by NRCS, then that can be waived in the middle of the project too, with some justification. Okay, so RCPP funding. Now we'll dive a little bit more into this FATA business. So we've got financial assistance, and that's for producer contracts, generally speaking, for eligible activities. When we get into easements, financial assistance is also used for a few other activities, so that's kind of specific. So, but in easements, we definitely do use them for partial contracts, which is the mechanism that is used in order to establish that easement on the running with the land. Okay, and then we've got technical assistance. So NRCS provides technical assistance for the conservation planning, and NRCS can also provide technical assistance for project management, outreach, and outcomes monitoring, as well as a few other categories. So, and those are funds that are only available to partners. Now we're moving towards, but it is not completely, completely changed yet, but we're moving towards having much larger buckets than we have in the past few years for technical assistance. given that RCPP right now is undergoing kind of a streamlining process, we're kind of in between zone of where we'd like to be and where we're approved to be and where we are right now with this notice of funding opportunity. And so at this point, we still have some of the similar terminology for those of you who are familiar with, what we've had in the past, but we're hoping that will, the intent is to loosen that up a little bit. And I think the notice of funding opportunity reflects that. We will still have an enhancement technical assistance. This is one kind of technical assistance that's only available for partners for their project management, their program, their project management, their outcomes and outreach. That will be in one large bucket, and I'll talk a little bit about if you want to put that in a proposal, how to do that, but that's kind of one large bucket of funding. And then the second bucket of funding will be, go ahead, next one, I think it's the next one, will be for what we have called in the past several years implementation TA, and that would be conservation planning. That's a technical assistance that can be split between NRCS and the partner for the conservation planning activities. And that really depends on the capacity of the partner, what kind of abilities do they have to do the NRCS conservation planning, and it's a negotiated process. So then just a little brief discussion about what are these project outcomes. This is kind of new in the 2018 Farm Bill. This is really a way to quantify more measurably and more scientifically how we're achieving the goals of our project. And so an outcome is a measurable metric of the project. The research goals or the research concerns, the goals of the objectives. So you would do an environmental metric that is related to your research concerns, your goals and your objectives. There would be monitoring, kind of more like a scientific baseline survey, and then monitoring across the life of the project as you're implementing both partner activities and you're implementing NRCS contracts for practices to the producer. So some examples include, for example, if you were looking at water quality effects or water quality resource concerns, you might measure in your bodies of water in your project area, sediment, temperature, nutrient monitoring. And you might do a initial baseline survey and then monitoring in key areas throughout the course of the project. Aquatic and terrestrial wildlife, if that was a research concern, the goals were say to fish passage into areas where they are excluded would be to monitor fish populations or reproductive, like REDS, reproductive structures, fish populations. Forestry inventory might be, if you were looking at forestry resilience, you might be monitoring the changes that you have done in a given project area on canopy ground cover. So often this means that you want to bring in an agency or a partner that has its qualifications, or use some of the NRCS funding to hire an outside contractor to do those things, because that's also something that can happen. Okay, so now I'm going to move a little bit into how our proposal is evaluated and some of the other pieces of a proposal in a project that need to be brought together. So proposals now are evaluated by 3 criteria: impact, partner contributions, and partnership and project management. So one of the things that is changed with RCPP is that partner contributions are really going to be focused more on how significant they are, how much they integrate with the project, how meaningful they are, and not so much do they match up to the amount that the partner is cumulatively contributing. And so quality over quantity is more important now. Impact is the most important thing. Is this a pressing issue? And I'll talk a few minutes about some of the initiatives. So we're really looking at, is it a pressing issue? And a lot of partnership and project management. How well have you thought out and designed the project? And how much experience do you have doing that project? I have some tips on that. So partner contributions As I said, high value is more important than reaching any particular kind of ratio. So having it really be meaningful. And that can be in kind as well as cash. There's very meaningful in-kind contributions. Part of proposal writing and project development is really communicating what that in-kind contribution is. If it's technical assistance, well, how meaningful is that? You know, what kind of staff do you have to do this or that, or monitoring? You know, what are their qualifications? What are you going to be providing? Because that could be integral and really important to the project. So the forms can be financial assistance or technical assistance for the partner contribution. The partner contributions can be similar to what NRCS is doing at FA&TA, or they can be something that is complementary. Something that is complementary might be addressing issues in that project area that NRCS can address with the NRCS funding, but that also address the resource concerns, so that there's an NRCS and a non-NRCS, you know, activity attacking that problem in that project area. So they should really amplify each other, partner contribution and the NRCS funding. Partner contribution can also be indirect costs. We cannot include indirect costs in the funding that we give to our partners, unfortunately. Maybe that will change, but it hasn't yet this year. So, but your indirect costs can be counted as part of your partner contribution. So that adds up. And partner contributions from non-USDA federal agencies can also be used. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service often has partner contributions. Bureau of Reclamation has partner contributions. And so those can be added in as well. Okay, so some of the initiatives that will also have rating for proposals will be how do you address incorporating the historically underserved in your project and in your project area if you are able to, and that can be tricky sometimes, but usually what we're looking for is some sort of outreach plan or some sort of encouragement plan, something that is unique to your project to incorporate historically underserved, or to reach out to those communities that maybe have not been participating. So that's something that if you feel like there's challenges, you know, we can talk about individually as well for the individual project. But there will be a historically underserved rating. Then there's going to be the administrative priority, which is also has to do with the IRA funding, or the Inflation Reduction Act, of climate smart agriculture, urban agriculture, and then racial justice and equity, which kind of meshes in with that historically underserved component. So when we're thinking about developing proposals, we really want to think about climate smart and climate adaptation or climate resilience. And almost everything that I've seen in Washington State, particularly, probably even across the country, has that kind of slant, because that's just what we're dealing with in conservation right now. So very few things can sort of touch on that to a greater or lesser extent. Okay, so a little bit more on, proposal development. So proposals for the uninitiated will be submitted online at a specific website called the RCPP Programs portal. And you're going to need a level 2 e-authentication, and that's something that you need to request pretty quickly, because that can be time consuming. Unfortunately, there's not a good process for that. And you can find where to request that as you go to the NRCS website for that portal. And you also request access to that portal so that you can develop and submit a proposal. So there is a proposal guide with proposal questions, and that can be found on the How to Apply page, and I have that. And this presentation will be available to you with all these links in it, or I can provide it to you later as well. So there's 17 questions that are in that program guide, partner program guide, and those are found in the appendix. So you can go through those questions and answer those ahead of time. Now, another important part of the proposal is a partner contribution letter. And this year it's changed a little bit. And one of the reasons why it's changed is to help streamline and lessen the amount of partner contribution work that has to be done if your project is funded. So this partner contribution letter is designed to really determine what the partner is going to contribute and kind of at what rates they're going to contribute or, you know, how you're coming to that amount that they're going to contribute. So what are they going to do? So it has a table. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. That's a little more involved, but then that allows us to, if funded, to kind of be done with the partner contribution side of it when we go and develop a partnership statement. And that template is found on the how to apply page. And then the proposal and project guide questions. They are, it's really helpful to read through those questions and pre-develop them, pre-write them out. And I have also, we're piloting this year a set of proposal questions or a list of questions and discussion points for you to work with your local DCs and then with myself to answer that tier with those proposal questions to kind of help it's kind of an outline for the proposal, because an RCPP proposal is not just a narrative, it is actually a response to several questions. So we've developed kind of a questionnaire that can be used with the different levels of NRCS so that you kind of have your proposal written out and coordinated with NRCS prior to even submitting it. And that just sort of takes away a lot of the uncertainty about how to answer the question or what is being looked for, or even how NRCS feels about it. So you have the best opportunity for success and a successful project. So there is a budget submission section of the proposals, and it's best to discuss the budget, both the financial assistance for what you want to do with your local field office. They're usually going to be the best one, but also then with myself, we have area coordinators. I'll kind of introduce you to them in a slide here in a few minutes as well. And they'll have an idea of, or give you some feedback on what you want to do. And is your FA and TA kind of in the realistic ballpark for those things? When you're submitting those actually into the portal in a proposal, you want to keep those at a high level. And what we don't want to do is submit that by year. So this is just kind of a real nuts and bolts when you're actually submitting a proposal, is go ahead and just do it as a lump sum, don't divide it up by a year. And that's one of the ways that we're going to streamline this process this year, where we're kind of going through our changes. Okay, go ahead. And so for technical assistance, I talk about the two different kinds. We've got the one that's for partners that they can use for outreach and project management and outcomes. And you'll want to, again, just bundle that into a big bucket. There is supposed to be a little place, I don't have access to it, you see, but there's supposed to be a place if you're submitting this in your proposal to kind of give a little narrative about what you're going to use it for. The top three things: project development, outcomes. Ideally, we have discussed that already, meaning you and your main partners and NRCS. So we've kind of hashed out what you're going to do, and so that it's not really a surprise, but also I've had a chance to kind of share with you some administrative tips and tricks that I found in administering this program that might make it easier. But you should keep those in big buckets, not divide things out by years, so that then we can just roll that into a partnership agreement that's a little more streamlined. And for implementation TA, that would be the conservation planning. That's often the one where we have a lot more negotiations between NRCS and the partners. We kind of look at who's really going to do what with conservation planning, because that requires a little higher level of training and certification. And so it's, if we can get some of that hammered out initially in the forefront during the sort of pre-proposal stage, then on the back end, it takes a lot less time when you're funded. And I think if your impact is really important across Washington State and hits on some of the targets, which almost all projects do right now, we're in, as with the state, we're in a funding heavy environment. So a lot of projects, as long as we all have the capacity to execute them, I think can get funded, because almost everything I've ever seen is certainly impactful. So I certainly can't promise that, but I think with good planning and strategy, we can get a lot funded. Okay. The partner contribution tables, there'll be 5 different financial assistance and TA types that you'll choose when you're looking at that partner contribution tables that kind of mirror the same activities that we've talked about with NRCS funding. And if you have problems with those, it's good to take a look at those. You can let me know, but they're pretty self-explanatory. And then we talked a little bit about the partner contribution letter templates. And then when you're doing your partner contributions, do just 1 line per activity type. Don't divide things up again by year. So what that means is you might have a partner that is going to contribute in-kind technical assistance, but they're also going to contribute financial assistance as an incentive to producers. So they've got 2 different types. So that might be 2 lines, but you would do 2 lines per year. I mean, 2 lines for the whole project. Don't divide anything up in years. Keep those in big buckets. And that's kind of how we're going to try to streamline for this year while we're in a transition process. So other documents that you're going to submit for the proposal and for the project is your map of your project area are really important. And that goes along with your impact. So you want to think about your project area, the impact that you want to have on the landscape and where you can make a measurable impact. So it shouldn't be too big, it shouldn't be too small. There's no magic size. It depends on what you're doing, how you're going to measure your impact, and in what area you feel like you can achieve those goals that you've set up for that resource concern, moving that dial or whatever that resource concern is. The map cannot be changed once your project is funded. So you do need to think carefully about that. It can be changed only with great difficulty. I was successful in assisting one change because they could demonstrate that there was just a technical mess up. There was a technical anomaly that had happened that it messed up one part of the project area map. But that was not easy to do. So be really careful with that. I really recommend that when you're doing a proposal, you do what I call a project resume, and that is who's going to work on this project, what are the staff or contractors, engineering contractors, archaeological contractors, outreach, and just briefly for the project purposes only, what are their qualifications and where they can work on it. This is an added document. There's a document section that you just upload that really shows who you have and what the capacity is for your project, for all different elements. It doesn't need to be long, you know, a page, 2 pages, depending on how many people, but it's very helpful, not only to set down in your own mind who's going to work on the project, but to communicate that to reviewers. And it shows good organization, project management. And a very simple project timeline. How are you going to execute the project? Not only how you're going to spend NRCS financial assistance, execute that to producers, you know, what is your timeline, but your partner contributions too, you know, how are those going to move together in order to achieve those goals, and even, you know, your outcomes. So just a very simple timeline can be, you know, bullet points, it can be a timeline chart. Doesn't have to be fancy, but it kind of shows that we've thought out how this project's going to run from 0 to 5 in an ideal world. Okay, so RCPP timeline we're on right now. The notice of funding opportunity was put out there on May 19th, and it's on grants.gov. I can also provide it to you. So I really recommend that you look at the proposal questions, and I also have the supplementary beta question guide that I'd love to send to anybody who is interested to sort of begin to fill out and help guide you on your proposal and thinking of your project development, where you're at, what you need. So I'm calling this the pre-submission questionnaire. It's something that's kind of being beta tested around the country. And then the whole proposal is due August 18th at 4:59 Eastern Daylight Time. So don't wait till the last, because there is glitches in our software. And if there's a glitch, you can submit later, but you may not always get a hold of somebody right on time. But if you are submitting and you're submitting late and there is a glitch, you will see in the notice of funding opportunity an RCPP headquarters email and my email. So email us, so I have documentation that you were trying to submit and you were not able to, so that I can then submit later, okay? So keep me in the loop, because I want the causes to be submitted. And then there is how to apply page with a couple of recorded webinars that sort of run through this in a different format, but sort of basics. Go ahead. And then what's going to happen next after you submit your proposal? It's going to take about 3 months. State and federal teams review these, and then it goes to the chief who you met yesterday, and he will make the final decisions on all of these. That last step sometimes takes a while because they have to be briefed on everything across the country. But we are hoping by mid-December. I think it'll probably be January, but we'll see. And then in this state, what we like to do for either classic or AFA is be prepared once for 2 things. If you're funded, one is that your partner contributions can start counting right away as soon as you're funded. So kind of be ready to start documenting those and keeping those, keeping track of those. And then 2 is we'll ask for you to give, doesn't have to be super in-depth, but a proposal presentation to the whole team, your team and the NRCS team that'll be working with you, because not the whole team has read the proposal or been a part of that proposal review process. So we have like some subject matter experts who may not know about the whole process. There may be things that also need to be worked out. So this is the time for the engineers to be there, the archaeologists to be there, the field staff, we're going to work on it, do the contracting, and everybody to begin to say, okay, hey, we've got to talk about this and that. This area may need a little more negotiation. And we will get a partnership agreement. Okay, got a typo there, partnership agreement between 1 and 3 months. That depends on a couple of things. If you kind of go through the questionnaire, the pre-submission checklist, with the field offices and myself, and then that feeds right into your proposal, that will probably lessen the time, because ideally we will come to some agreements about all of these things, or we will have hashed out kind of what those should look like. And then also we just need the part, this is a partnership. We can't cut to a partnership agreement unless you're ready to usually dedicate at least 1 lead individual. Is what I have found is easiest. Just going to take the lead on just pulling those things together. A lot of what we've done this year is going to streamline some of the processes that we need to do during the partnership agreement phase, and so it should be more quick. But if you're not ready, or your partnership isn't ready to engage, when we get that funding out, it'll be hard for us to get that partnership agreement established quickly, as it takes both of us. And you'll be working with me a lot on that, as well as our area RCPP coordinators and the local field office. So this is just what sort of the top of this pre-submission funding form looks like. Like I said, it's not required. This is kind of beta testing. The questions here feed into the proposal questions. Ideally, if this comes about as a new process, these questions should be the exact same questions as the proposal question, but we're still kind of in flux now as RCPP is trying to streamline. But this is a jumping off point, a talking point that you can do with the local district conservationists and their staff and myself, and it feeds right into the proposal. So we can just kind of go through them, talk about them. You could even sit there with your partners, sort of fill it out in a real general loose sense and bring it in, and we can talk about those together, kind of workshop that together more. This is what the new partner contribution letter looks like. It's a lot more detailed, and the purpose of this is to get the information up front. It's very important for your partners to fill this in, and it's to get the information up front, and that way, when funded, it just streamlines right into our partnership agreement, and we don't need more information from your partners. A note on partners, usually the number of partners that you might have in a project should usually be partners, or I guess I should say usual. It has appeared to me it works best if it is partners who are actually going to be doing some activities. If there are partners that are kind of in the back partner, your partners that are going to be funding you the grant money that you are then going to distribute, or your organization is going to distribute, but they're not going to actually do substantive work as part of this project on the ground or project management work, then you may not want to have them as an official partner. You may want to instead have them just agreement with them, they're feeding you, and you are the partner who is actually doing the work. That works out better administratively for funding. And then how many partners to have, that's a balancing act. How many do you want to juggle in your project management? So, there's kind of it seems to be kind of a sweet spot of, I don't know, 3 to maybe under 10, but it really depends on the project, depends on how spread out you are. So that's something that we can always talk about. So no, it's okay. You're good. Your resources are myself, and I'm available to talk about your projects, and would be happy to set up time and to coordinate you, getting you in to talk with the right other folks as well in the field. We have Linnell Cunningham. She is an RCPP engineer. She will often be involved with all stages of projects, and then she might hand things off to engineers we have in each of our areas. So it just kind of depends. In the west side, as the West Area RCPP coordinator, we have Jared Hammond, and he would be involved with all the proposals in the project. In the east, we have Stephen Heisey. He's also acting RCPP area coordinator for the central area. And then we have Alexandra James. She's our RCPP liaison. So she's funded part by NRCS and part by WALT, which is an easement organization that I don't remember the acronym for. Sean, no. But anyway, she will be giving a presentation. We're looking at tentatively June 20th to give an easement presentation. So if you know folks out there interested in easements, let me know. Other resources, the Washington RCPP webpage mainly has links to the national page. We've got the national webpage. There is success stories of RCPP in action that are real broad across the nation, but you can get ideas of organizations and things that they've done, and you can write to those organizations and ask them if they would share their proposal and more about their projects. And then the How to Apply webpage has the resources there that you will need and the information. Okay, I've covered a lot. It's been really broad, and I know we have a broad audience here. So, yes, please.
Got a whole list of questions, but I'll just I'll take turn. So in the previous sign up, so previous announcement, we had the renewal process for partnerships that had previously accomplished and done a good job. Is that renewal opportunity still continuing to?
Oh, it will.
Is there any guidance on if you have a renewal, can you be eligible for future renewal or anything like that?
Yeah, so renewals will be eligibility for renewal is generally speaking 1 year prior to the end of your project. So that information comes out and then it is sent out. It has been sent out to me and I send that out to you to current projects. And I say, you're up for renewal and here is the current criteria that we're looking at. Great. So you will know.
Do you perceive that will continue into the next?
Yes,
bill?
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, the next farm bill. Oh gosh, I can't predict that, but it will continue. What are we at? Yeah, I guess we'll have one more at least.
Okay.
Yes. I'm hoping the next farm bill. I haven't heard anything. I mean, that's really well, and we'd like to keep that. So, yes, in the back door.
Does your project area have to be contiguous?
I don't know. I've never dealt with one that was not contiguous. So you're talking about like, we got one here and then we got one here and there's some space in between?
Like, let's say 2 districts have similar something that
Yeah.
together, but they are not geographically linked.
So you're not drawing a big bubble around both of them, but you want to have,
I mean, hypothetically, you could draw a big bubble around them, but I think to make it stronger, it would make more sense to have specific areas.
I certainly think if you were measuring outcomes for both, like that would make it. Your outcomes be more prominent, because otherwise you would have a diluted area. Yeah, so I'm not sure, that's a good question. I will ask. And get back to you about that, yeah.
Sound, an RCPP that was with fire people sound,
Yeah.
that only projects were scattered around.
I think that might have been a how not.
Okay.
Yes, that was really,
Right?
that was really difficult, yeah, and if we had the environment today where we're trying to look at that environmental outcomes metric, it would be hard to measure that, instead of, we had X number of contracts, or they were X size, or they were, instead we're looking at, well, how do we move the dial on that resource concern? So, yeah. So I will get back to you on it. My sense is that's probably gonna be a no. It's probably gonna be a whole project, but I will certainly ask. I have not seen anything on that. Okay.
Another one.
Yeah, go for it. I
So,
don't see anybody else.
yeah, so I saw some of the questions in that pre-submission questionnaire. Is one of the thoughts behind that will help you kind of understand the TA percentage and negotiate some of that ahead of time by knowing the qualifications of what NRCS staff are gonna do versus what partner staff still want to negotiate for TAI.
For those questions that are sort of in the middle of that, and that was just part of it, because they do tier with those 17 questions that are on the proposal, so it covers a lot of other stuff. It is a way so that there's sort of try to be less surprises, so when you go into the proposal. And when I said we're beta testing this, it's because it's possible. I can't say anything about what will be approved, where we're going, but it's possible that this might move into a more, hey, let's do a lot of our negotiation up front, and maybe have something with more level of approval that feeds into the proposal process. I don't know if it'll go that way, but we're beta testing to see those who use it, if anybody uses it, across the country. So I've got this version here, which I think is a good tool for discussion. In the past, what I've done with partners is we've gotten together the team of who's gonna, work on that project in that area, like the district conservationist, myself, when we had an area conservationist, maybe planners, engineers, and we've talked about the project, and the partners have said, okay, here's what we want to do, but we didn't have a framework to discuss it. So here is just kind of a framework for us to discuss it, and it's made in such a way that it feeds into and it helps you with the proposal questions. So we've already discussed those, and then you just plunk them over there. And hopefully that will help not only develop the project, but make us all agree on the project, TA and FA included. But also outcomes, that's a thing that has been hard for people to wrap their mind around, or for some partners to wrap their mind around, so we have a chance to sort of talk about that. A thing you didn't see there was the exact table that you would use in the partnership agreement. We can sit and go over it. So it's just kind of a tool that I would be excited to use on some of your burning conservation issues.
I think we're
at
over
time.
time a little bit, so
Okay.
if Jennifer has more questions, maybe you guys can
I
chat.
would be more than happy.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura.